Greetings, I'm Reverend Aaron Moore. I'm the current pastor, Palisades Presbyterian Church, located here in Palisades, New York. Our church was founded in 1864, the final year of the Civil War, and an interesting fact is that one of our founding members, prior to coming here to Palisades, was out in the Midwest. He owned a number of grocery stores, Winthrop Gilman, as well as some warehouses to store the goods. It was in one of his warehouses in Altoona that Elijah Lovejoy, the abolitionist, was martyred. And so there's this connection that Winthrop Gilman had with Lovejoy. He knew him, he had a personal relationship with him. Gilman faced charges for assisting an abolitionist. So after the fire in the warehouse and this attack that claimed Lovejoy's life in 1837, it was shortly after that is when Winthrop Gilman came back here, where he was originally from, where he had family and settled down a bit more. About a year ago, I helped lead HRP's Racial Justice Team's book club. The book we read was What Kind of Christianity by William Yu, and a handful of members from Palisades participated in that. Well, our final gathering, we encouraged all who are attending to look into their own history, to look into their church's history, to see if there's any racism, to see if there's anything that needed to be acknowledged, to be named, to be lifted up, to be made right. Following that, one of our church members reached out to a local historian to see if she had any information. Our church doesn't have a church history book, and so we reached out to her to see if she knew of anything within the community, within our church. And there isn't a lot that is recorded in the Palisades history regarding slavery or racism, but what she did write back is, but did you know that the KKK visited your church in Palisades, in the 1920s? To which we did not. We were shocked to find out this news, and she included an article from a local newspaper that was attached, this article that was written up shortly after this event took place. This event took place in August of 1925. In the summer, they had evening services, and these services were sparsely attended. When the regular parishioners came, they found the sanctuary was kind of already full. Their normal pews perhaps had strangers sitting in them. They also found that the first few pews were roped off, and this is something that was never done. The service started, and before they could even wrap their minds around what was going on, the KKK came in their full regalia, walked down the aisle up to the front right here. And they asked if they could join the service, and they presented the pastor, Reverend Joseph Fair, with an offering. The pastor, who had apparently known they were coming, for the pews in the front were roped off. We don't know how much advance he had. Was it 5 minutes? Was it a half hour? Was it a day or days ahead? We don't know, but he allowed them to join, sitting in the front row, and the church was overflowing with over 100 people. The offering plate was also passed, and so there was an overabundance of money that came in that day, the equivalent to $1,600 today. Between the check that the KKK gave and the offering plate that was passed. A normal offering would have been very small, and so $1,600 in one day was huge. And the session and the pastor, they accepted this. Leading up to this, in our session books, there were notes that the church was in financial struggle. And this is often what was seen in our area. The KKK would find churches that were in financial stress and show up and visit and present them with a large chunk of money. Our church isn't the only one that experienced this. This happened in churches throughout our presbytery, in every county in our presbytery. Here in Rockland alone, it happened in Nyack, in Blauvelt, in Suffern, in Sloatsburg. We know that it happened in churches in Westchester, in Cornwall, and beyond. In many, many churches in our presbytery, the KKK came and visited and presented an offering. It was also a requirement for someone to be a member of the KKK. They also needed to be a member of a local congregation. And so we don't know who might have been a member within Palisades, if there was one. Either way, the KKK found out that we were in financial distress, and they came and they were welcomed by the pastor. They participated in the service, and the church benefited from this hate organization. And so when Session found this out, what we decided to do was to create a racial justice task force. Our task force did a number of things. We looked further into our history, did some more research and digging. We're still in the process of doing that. We created an anti-racism fund, and the first $1,600 that we collected in that fund, we donated to the NAACP of Nyack as reparations, recognizing that the church benefited off of this hate group, and we wanted to make that right. We also, any money that continued to come into that fund gets donated to local organizations in our community doing anti-racism work and racial justice work. And we are partnering with those organizations, with our community, to do racial justice work in our community and beyond. And so we invite you as well to look into your history, to see what you might need to make amends for, what you might celebrate. Often there seems to be some struggles, right? We didn't have a linear, easy line where we had one of our founding fathers as an abolitionist, and we could tell nothing but good stories, but no, we have this rocky past, and we don't know what else is out there, but we're continuing to look into it and to make amends, as well as doing the racial justice work that is needed for today. And so will you join us, and will you join others in the presbytery doing this work?
My name is Gay Hartwig, and I am here in front of the First Presbyterian Church of Port Jervis, New York. Across from me is Veterans Park, and it has been there for 150, 200 years, and Stephen Crane used to sit in this park just to watch the people and observe what was going on. From 1860 through 1865, the recruits would come and gather here on these steps in front of the church before joining the Union Army to go and fight for the slaves, to free the slaves. So then, 30 years later, on June 2nd, 1892, it was a beautiful, sunny, warm summer day, and Robert Lewis was down at the Neversink River fishing. Straight to in that direction is the Delaware River, but about a mile to the east is the Neversink River. So he was about a mile away. And sitting on the banks of the river was a young woman, and she was reading a book. So when she comes back to Port Jervis, she starts saying that she has been raped by the young black man who was down there fishing. So as Robert Lewis returns to town, he is met by several of a group of men who take him and start dragging him through town. They come up Sussex Street and up the hill, past the jail, past the police station. The policeman, the chief on duty, comes out and tries to get them to leave Robert in the jail, in the police station. But they do not. They continue to drag him up Sussex Street. The pastor at the time of First Presbyterian Church hears the commotion and comes out to see what is happening. And meanwhile, as they are coming up the street, more and more people join them. So they at least have 1,000 people as they come to the church. And the pastor comes out and he tries to, with his big, deep voice in the 60s, which he used to fill the entire sanctuary, he tries to address the crowd and tell them that this is not justice, that they need to give the Robert to the policeman and to do things in the lawful order. But they will not listen. They come on past the Methodist Church, which is across the corner, the Presbyterian Church, on up to Main Street. And when they get there, hanging isn't enough. They beat him up, and then ultimately he is lynched and hung. So as the mob dragged Robert up Sussex Avenue, Sussex Street, they turned right onto Main Street. We are exactly in front of the Deer Park Reformed Church manse, between the Deer Park Reformed Church and a Baptist church on the other side. In the last couple of years, this memorial marker has been erected in memory of Robert Lewis and his lynching. In the meantime, all of this is buried, partly because it made national, possibly international news. Until 1892, all of the lynchings had been in the South. And this one was not. It was above the Mason-Dixon line. In response, partly in response to the increased prosperity of the African American population, which threatened white supremacy. In 2020, with the murder of George Floyd, a group of young black women, college-age women from Port Jervis, started to get together and had a march for Black Lives. And because of some of that activity, this old story was brought to life. And Black Lives Matter, they organized a march which came up and ended here in front of the church. The speakers, the broadcast system, the speaker system was on this church porch, and several people spoke, and we had 7.5 minutes of silence, kneeling, remembering George Floyd. And because of that, this old story was brought to life.